Hey everyone, it's Umar again. Welcome back. And today we're going to install an IDE or integrated development environment and get away from programming in Notepad or TextEdit. This is going to be great. It's going to supercharge our ability to program going forward. And it's the way it's done by professional programmers everywhere. I mean, virtually nobody uses a text editor anymore to do actual production level programming. They use an IDE. And that's the journey we're going to go on starting today, beginning with the download of the IDE and continuing in this video with functions to continue forward what we did by introducing functions in the last video. So thanks for joining me again, and let's get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and download the Intellij IDEA integrated development environment so we can start programming in Java using an IDE rather than a text editor. So let's go ahead and go to your browser, whichever one you want to use, and I'm going to type in, and this is the name of the company that runs it. You can type JetBrains Intellij IDEA, or just Intellij IDEA would work. Google will find it, no problem. I'm going to click on this link that says Intellij IDEA, the capable and ergonomic Java IDE by JetBrains. And so once you get here, you can go to download. And what you'll want to do is download the one for your version. So what you want is this, not the ultimate version, because that'll cost you money. And up here is where you'll click the Windows or the macOS or the Linux version. In my case, I'm going to click macOS and come over here to the Community Edition. And instead of DMG Intel here on the right, because I don't have an Intel Mac, I have the M1 Apple Silicon, so I'll download using the link on the left. But if you do have an Intel Mac, you would use the, or excuse me, I am corrected. So what you'll do is come over here and choose your version. So I'm going to do DMG Apple Silicon, and it'll go ahead and automatically start downloading it, in my case, to the Downloads folder. And I can see in the bottom left of my browser, it shows the download happening there. About a 34 megabyte size. It'll be 20 more seconds. And while it's downloading, I'll take the opportunity to say that there are so many different IDEs you could use to program in Java. Intellij IDEA is just one of them. There's also Eclipse, there's NetBeans, run by Apache, and there are several others. So if you don't use this one, and you're comfortable using a different IDE, that's fine too. But all my examples and all the programs I'll be developing in this video series, as they relate to Java, will be done using this IDE here, the Intellij IDEA. All right, so let's go back and let's see what the Downloads folder now holds. If I go to Downloads, I see this file here, the IDLC 2021, and then it's got some version number, and it'll say AArch64DMG. Whatever it says, go ahead, double click that, and you'll drag this into the applications folder, and that should install it. And it's really all that easy. If you're doing this on a Windows, it's very similar. You download the executable file and you double click it to run the installer. It's just as easy. I'm not going to go ahead and walk through that process because I've already installed the Intellij IDEA IDE, and so I'm just going to go ahead and open that. Let's get rid of this. There we go. Okay, so now we have the Intellij IDEA IDE open, and it looks like this. And what we'll do first is start a new project to show you, to walk through how you would get started with Intellij IDEA. So let's start a new project. And over here, I'm going to choose Java as the project type. It'll ask me which version of Java, and we have 17, the latest one here. And don't worry about additional libraries or frameworks or Gradle or Android or Maven. None of this will matter right now. Just need Java. Then I'm going to go to Next down here in the bottom right. And this is going to be a command line app. I'm going to click Next. And let's just make this the Hello app. So his project name is Hello with a capital H. And from there, I'll click Finish. And what this will do is create an empty project for you with really nothing in it. So we're going to have to start building the project ourselves. So up here in the project pane, what you'll see is the Hello project, and it stores it, in this folder, Idea Projects. And I would ignore pretty much all of what you see here on the left, except where it says source. SRC means source. And when we say source, that means the code that is written that this program will run, also known as source code. Whenever you've written a program in previous videos, that's called source code as well. I'm going to right-click it and say New, and we'll start from scratch and call it a new file. And I'm going to call it, with a capital H, hello.java. And here, I'm going to do as I did before, public class hello. And notice when I create the opening curly brace, it automatically created the closing curly brace and indented the code for me so it's more easily readable. And finally, it also color-coded certain words. Public and class are color-coded because they are keywords in Java. Certain keywords get colored certain ways, and hello is gray because it's a name that I provided. And so from here, I'm going to do as we did before, and create the main function. Again, when I create the open curly brace, the closing curly brace is automatically created for me. And inside, I'm going to write system. Now notice as soon as I type sy, system pops up. And it also tells me which Java programming package, and that's a new word I haven't used yet, system is part of. System is part of the java.lang package, and you see that right there. We'll talk about that more in detail later, but the important part right now is this is code completion in action. If you didn't know if system was supposed to be uppercase or lowercase, you can't remember, that's fine. This helps you and says, oh, okay, you're trying to type system. And then if I just type the letter O, it knows, oh, you're probably trying to type out. You can hit the tab key or double click the out down there, or I think maybe just click. Okay, double click, and it'll automatically put that in for you in case you forget that out comes next, if you couldn't remember the exact word. And then once I hit the dot again, the most common functions that come after that are displayed next. And let's say I want print line. And inside, I'm going to put what I want it to print. And let's say I type a new line character and I want it to print hello world, ! And notice it also put the semicolon in for me. If I leave it out, let's see what happens. If I leave it out, you get this red line on the right side of the screen that says semicolon expected. And further, over here you'll see a little red squiggly line to indicate something's missing. Let's make another mistake and see what happens. I'm going to eliminate the letter M from system, and the whole part turns red because Java doesn't understand what systa is. It's missing a letter, so it doesn't know what that is at all. I'm going to put the M back. So this is what I mean by an IDE really helping you, and it should, because programming shouldn't be about memorizing every little, piece of how you're supposed to write things. You should just be aware of what you're trying to do, and the IDE will help you with all the details. For example, whether or not a keyword is supposed to be uppercase or lowercase, if you need quotation marks or a closing curly brace or semicolon somewhere, the IDE will help remind you of what you're missing, because it's very easy to make these mistakes while programming, let's say in a text editor. All right, I'm going to save this, and let's run this and see what happens. To run it, I can go up here to this hammer icon to build the project. I could also go up to the Run menu and just click run, and it'll build and run the project for me. So it's asking me what I want to run, and I want to run hello. So I click it, and there we have it. Down below is what we have, what's called an integrated command line. In other words, I didn't have to save this somewhere else and then open up the terminal and then type Java C, to compile the program, and then type Java and then the name of the file to run it. It's all integrated into the IDE, and so the terminal opens up in the bottom and shows you your output. So that's really great. That's another thing you don't have to worry about. So let's see what happens in the IDE if I actually made a mistake like that, and I forgot to put in the semicolon, and I didn't address the warning here. Now when I go to try to run it, it gives me this error. It tells me there's a semicolon expected. And of course, that's because I made that error on purpose to show you what would happen. Once I place it back and I hit play again, everything works out just fine. And so the IDE is working, and so let's gear up to create a new project here that will do something a little more interesting in the IDE. So what we're going to do now is go up here to File and close this project. And now that we've closed the project, we're going to go and create a new one. Up here we're going to click on New Project. Notice that the recent projects are here, so for easy access should you want to open one you just worked on. So that's pretty good. But I'm going to go to New Project. Again, I'm going to create a new Java 17 project. Click Next. Next again. And this time I'm going to name the project Print Patterns. And we'll see why. But I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And the project is created. And once again, we're going to go to Source, and I'm going to click a New, Create New, and create a new file. And that file I'm going to call print pattern.java. And just like before, I'm going to create the public class with the same name as the file. Notice that this will also help me because it recognizes the file name. So I just hit Tab, and it puts in the print pattern name just from the file. And as before, I'm going to create the main method. And in here, I'm going to call a function to print a pattern to the console. So I'm going to say print pattern 1. And notice it shows up red because I haven't defined the function yet. That's something I have yet to do. So there's nothing we can do to fix that until we create that function. So remember, I'm calling it from the static void main function, or the main function, which is static. So the function print pattern 1 has to be static as well. I'm going to call this public static void because it's not going to return anything. We still haven't talked about that yet. And we'll say print pattern 1, and there we have it. It's no longer red up in the main method because we've defined the function even though we haven't made it do anything yet. So let's do something that's a good exercise to understand how for loops work to build a pattern. What I want to do in the console is to print 5 rows of 5 columns of asterisks. And an asterisk, is just that character above the number 8. When you hit Shift 8, you get the asterisk, right? And I want to show 25 of them in 5 rows of 5 in the console. How would I go about doing something like that? Well, first of all, I need to do 5 rows of it. So every time I print a row, I needed to go to the next row and print the next 5. And this is where I'm going to introduce a technique using something called nested for loops. And they're used all the time in programming. And what they are is where you have a for loop inside of a for loop. If you've never seen this, it is pretty cool. And let me show you how that works. So basically, I'm going to define what we're calling the outer for loop. And I'm going to use a counting variable. And we're going to go, I is going to go from 0 to less than 5. And each time I iterates, I want I to increase by 1. And you could write I equals I plus 1 here. And that's what we've been doing before to indicate that I will be increased by 1. And that value will then be assigned back to I. So if I was 1, it'll become 2 and be now reassigned to I was now 2, and so on. But there is a shorthand to this. You don't have to do this, but it is somewhat convenient. If I write plus plus after the I, that's a shorthand way of saying I equals I plus 1. If you're comfortable with that, you can go ahead and start using that shorthand. If not, you can go back to using I equals I plus 1. But this plus plus is known as the increment operator. And so more technically, it's called a postfix increment operator. And there is something called a prefix increment operator where you do the plus plus before the I. And you might want to do that in some cases. In this case, I'm going to put it afterward, and we'll discuss the difference between pre and postfix at another time. All right, so I'm going to put the curly brace here, and inside, I'm going to create another for loop. But this time I need a different variable than I, and I'm going to say j equals 0 to j less than 5, j plus plus, and again, another set of curly braces. And again, I think I have a incorrect character there. Okay, so, and again, it automatically created the closing braces for me every time I opened one. So here's what's going to happen. The outer for loop is going to say I is 0. It's going to see that I is less than 5, so it's going to go to the next instruction. The next instruction is another for loop. And this time it's known as the inner for loop. And in this inner for loop, it says j is 0 and j is less than 5, but it's got to complete this entire inner for loop before it goes back to I in the outer for loop to do the next instruction. So every time I runs, it's going to run the inner loop with j 5 times before it goes back to I to increment it and then come back down. So let me show you what I mean. Every time this runs, I want it to print and this time I'm going to use print instead of print line. Print makes it so it doesn't create a new line after making a print, creating something to the console, putting something on the console. So I'm going to asterisk and let's say a space character. And then after it iterates, we want it to print a new line, not before. And if I just do print line like this without anything in the parentheses, then it'll just print a line, and then it'll go and increment the I variable, go back to j again, the inner loop, and do that 5 times, go back to I again. So every time I iterates, or the outer loop iterates, the inner loop iterates 5 times. And then when I iterates 5 times, the entire loop structure is completed. Let's see if this does what we want. So I'm going to go up to run, and I'm going to click run. It's asking me what to run, so I click print pattern, and there we have it, 5 rows of 5 asterisks. Let's see if we can understand what happened here. What happened here is, and I'm going to go through it again. Let's say we begin it we begin at the beginning and we have I equals 0, I is less than 5, so it goes to the next step. So we're looking at this. So I is less than 5, so it goes here. So now j is 0 and j is less than 5, so it says print an asterisk and a space. Great. Then it goes to the j++, which increases j by 1. Now, j is 1, and 1 is less than 5, so it prints another asterisk with a space. And it does that until j equals 5. Well, 5 is not less than 5, so it breaks out of this for loop. And the next thing it's going to do is print a new line. In other words, go to the next line of the output. Then it'll increment I. I was 0, now I is 1. Well, 1 is less than 5, so it comes back down, and it'll go to j equals 0 again. So j is 0 is less than j5, so it'll print the asterisk, then increase j by 1, and so on, and it'll print it 5 times in a row again, then go to the next row, then I will increment to 2, and so on. So this is why this prints 5 rows of 5. And notice I started at 0 and go to less than 5. This is pretty conventional in computer programming to start at 0. And if you notice, 0 to less than 5 means 0 to 4 included. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 5 numbers. You could have just as easily gone from 1 to less than or equal to 5, and it would have done the same thing. But for reasons which will become clear later, it makes more sense in computer programs to start your variables at 0 most of the time. So there we have it. We use the IDE. We use what we learned in the last program by defining a function and calling that function in main. And we introduced a new technique of nested for loops, and in this case, to produce an array. This is, in fact, an array. We use a nested for loop to create an array of asterisk characters to print to the console. And in the next video, we'll stop it here, and in the next video, we'll make this program a little more dynamic so that you can determine yourself how many rows of how many columns you want to make the pattern. And then I'll issue a challenge as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so we just were able to download an IDE to start programming in Java. The Intellij IDE is fantastic, and we'll see how it works out for us as we go forward, as we continue to learn these programming concepts, which are foundational to all of programming. Today we carried forward the concept of the function and learned a little bit more about how to use the functions. And in the next video, we're going to build a little bit more complicated program that involves several other functions, and it'll really start to tie together what we've learned so far in this series of videos, which includes, declaring variables, assigning values to those variables, for loops, and functions. And so I hope you join me next time. Make sure to leave some comments or suggestions down below, and I'll see you then.